Dala Dhawa Jebe Dra Nopar Jebe Ge Dharba Dan Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Se Jebe Mananga Dan Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Dunya Dan De Nerdu Lana Mepa Yan Dabra Sobe Chanchu Rinpo Je Tobra Dala Dhawa Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ge Dharba Dan Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Se Jebe Manangkada Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Dunya Dan De Nerdu Lana Mepa Yan Dabra Sope Chanchu Rinpo Je Tobra Dala Dhawa Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ge Dharba Dan Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Se Jebe Manangkada Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan De Dunya Dan De Nerdu Lana Mepa Yang Dabra Sobe Chanchu Rinpo Je Toba De Je Du Salma Gegi Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Go Mashi Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Go Du Dirine Sunte Nema Tanta Samji Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Go Zonje Chodan Sugi Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Tani Gyabzu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sanje Drubroshu Sanje Chodan Sugi Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Tani Gyabzu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sanje Drubroshu Sanje Chodan Sugi Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Tani Gyabzu Chi Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sanje Drubroshu Manam Kadan Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Tang Dewe Gundan Tempura Gyurji Dunya Dan Dunya Gi Gyudan Drawa Gyurji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dhame Drawa Gyurji Chadan Nidan Drawe Tanyam La Nebra Gyurji Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Tempura Gyurji Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Gyudan Drawa Gyurji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dhame Drawa Gyurji Niring Chadan Nidang Drawe Tanyam La Nebra Gyurji Manam Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Tempura Gyurji Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Gyudan Drawa Gyurji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dhame Drawa Gyurji Niring Chadan Nidang Drawe Tanyam La Nebra Gyurji. So now in the different language rooms, we will read the 7-branch puja. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense, I offer to you, conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you, conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind, under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas, solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexcelled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. Ndroje Jangwante Le Naro Dama Me Dabo Pado Jiten Gonga Denzo Denza Vela Me Shav Sajula Ma Yidam Chokyong La Zova Denzo Dagi Jenje Lo Kya Drengi Do Men Sam Lengen Tapai Tonso Yong La Kyab So Me Kya Wado Jang Pa Jinten Gumbo Shav La Do Do Tak Do Sang Yu Kyo Le Me Jinji Lo Shi Tu Je Je Nengi Mun Bese Ne Kyang Sim To De Do Do Pra Jenje Lo Hong Jenyo Jena Chang Sam Pe Ma Ki Sa Dombo La Ya Zen Jo Keng Go Dum Nye Pe Ma Jun Ne She Sho Da Go Do Kan Do Mang Po Go Re Ge Ge Je Se Ta Do Ge Jen Je Lab Je She Su So Lo Guru Pe Ma Se De Hong O Ming Chu Ken Ye Ken Po Da Ne Do Sun Sang Je Kun Jing O Wo Nye Rang Sen Jo Gong Yong Sun Ton Du Se Ba Tsa Wei La Me Shob La So Wa De Sa Shi Pu Ki Ju Shi Me Do Tra Ri La Lin Shi Nen Ten Ken Pa Di San Je Shin Do Ming Te Po Wa Ye Tro Kun Nam Da Shin La Ke Wa Sho Gu Sun Yong So La Me Zo Nan La Chin Nang San Sun De Shin Ni Ki Chu Da Lu Lon Chu Nang Shi Yong She La La Me Chu Ki Nga Du Zo Du Zo Cha Zo Wa Da Jo Jing Shang Pa Dan Je Sun Yi Rang Gu Sing So Wa Ye Ge Wa Chung Se Da Ge Ji Sang Pa Tam Je So Pe Chang Je Je Ngo Om Guru Deva Da Ki Ni Rana Mendala Prate Cha So Ha Sem Je Nam Ki Sam Pa Da Lo Ye Ji Dra Ji Da Wa Je Jung Tu Mon Te Ba Ye Chogi Golo Goro Do So again, hello to everyone. Good evening, good morning. For those of you who have access to this, I want to point out that there are numerous books that are available on the commentary or teachings on the Bodhicharyavatara. From the very accessible modern commentary by Bodhicharyavatara JUN. I only know of the publications that are in English, sorry. Then to translations of like classic commentaries. and one of the best translations of these classic commentaries is this called The Nectar of Manjushri's Speech. The Nectar of Manjushri's Speech. This is a commentary written by Khenpo Kunzang Pelden, also called Khenpo Kunpel for short. Kunzang Pelden, Khenpo Kunzang Pelden. And Khenpo Kunzang Pelden was a direct student of Pedro Rinpoche. And Pedro Rinpoche is the Lama who, you could say, single-handedly brought Bodhicharyavatara out of the confines of very specialized, like Buddhist college and Buddhist seminaries in Tibet, out of that context and into the public context, where he taught this in public gatherings to monastics, to lay people, to everyone and anyone. So it was Pedro Rinpoche, this great Nyingma master, who brought Bodhicharyavatara into the general public in Tibet. This Pedro Rinpoche and his student who wrote this, Khenpo Kunpel, they lived in the 1800s in eastern Tibet. So for those of you who know English, and this is definitely a good one to have. Then also now I'm just remembering to remind myself and remind everyone. So since the way we are doing this course involves interpretation, and I'm very grateful to the interpreters, the Wei Ting, who has been doing this for the Chinese, Mandarin Chinese interpretation, and then to a group that has been doing this into Spanish. So since we're doing this in this style, that means we have a pause, right, in between. Some of you I know two languages, so then you can listen to this twice. But those of you who don't know two languages, really give yourself a treat, you know. This is a couple of hours where you can put aside all distractions, and not so much like force yourself to be focused, but really try to approach this being focused not so much as something that you have to force yourself to do, but rather to see, to recognize how it's a real treat that you get to give yourself. So to see the doing of many other things as a source of stress, as ultimately, not something that you really want. You're searching for something, but because we've been habituated with, if I do more, that I might get the result I'm looking for. Now these 2 hours on Tuesday and on Saturday, really give yourself a treat to just settle. So during the times where it's a break, you don't understand the other languages offered, either look at the text, read the text a few verses forward, a few verses backward, or just settle and develop presence and awareness anchored in the now, present in the body. Before we start chapter 4, there is one other thing at the end of chapter 3 that I think it's worth spending a few more minutes to look at, which is this expression in those, it says step by step in verse 23 and 24, the two main verses for generating bodhicitta. This expression step by step. So it says, Shantideva says, just as the great beings of the past have done this step by step, now I too will do this step by step. So this is really important, I think, for us to pay attention to, step by step. So there are many ways to explain step by step in a more specific way. So the overall idea of step by step, it means gradually develop, gradually cultivate, gradually bring about all these skillful, virtuous states of mind, gradually do away with, purify the non-virtues, the unskillful states of mind. The overall meaning, of course, is that. So here often some stories are given about how, if we don't do this bit by bit and build up, you could say, the Bodhisattva muscles, then if we are, caught up in a moment of kind of, ultimately you could say it's a type of egotistical habit patterns, caught up in a moment of like, oh, I'm going to be a Bodhisattva Superman or Superwoman, and overextend ourselves. Then it's the equivalent of, going to the gym, weightlifting, kind of being foolishly inspired by how heavy other people can lift. You immediately try to lift something that is beyond what your current muscles can handle. You will tear your muscles and then suffer a lot of pain and setback. So we have to be careful not to do that. Then in a more detailed way of talking about this step by step, one way, some of you might know these categories and divisions. So one way explains it this way. There's one way to explain it, which is to bring together what's known as the 5 paths. So on one's progression to the state of Buddha, you can talk of it in terms of the 10 Bodhisattva levels or bhumis, right? That's one system. Another system speaks of it as consisting of 5 paths. It's called 5 paths. These 5 paths are the path of accumulation, the path of joining, then the path of seeing, then the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. Then at the end of these 5 paths, you arrive at the state of Buddha. So these are known as the 5 paths. As a footnote, Gampopa's jewel ornament, Targen, goes into detailed explanation, discussion on what these 5 paths are. So you can look that up and learn more about these 5 paths. But here, it's then, so you have the 5 paths, right? Then there's also what's known as the 3 Bodhisattva discipline. Yeah? So insofar as how the discipline that all Bodhisattvas should train in, there are said to be 3 parts to it. The first part is to avoid all negativity, then to cultivate all skillful actions, skillful states, and the third, to benefit beings. Those are the 3 Bodhisattva disciplines. Then, when we are on the path of accumulation, which most of us are there, some of us maybe have not even arrived at the path of accumulations, but as long as we are, all the way up to the end of the path of accumulation, so to say, then mainly, even though after taking the Bodhisattva vow, generating bodhicitta, the 3 disciplines we know we should practice, but mainly on the path of accumulations, we have to mostly work on avoiding negative actions of body, speech, and mind. Then, on the path of joining, that is when we foreground the accomplishment, the cultivating and the refining of all the positive actions, virtuous actions. It is when we arrive at the path of seeing, that's when benefiting beings becomes real. So from the path of seeing onwards, what we do to benefit beings can actually have a chance of meaningfully benefiting beings.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, can you repeat again?
On the path of seeing, only at the point of having arrived at the path of seeing, then can we truly benefit beings, or begin to meaningfully benefit beings. Even before path of seeing, you might think, oh, I'm benefiting beings. But what you do may or may not actually benefit beings. So this last point of that it has to be first arriving at the path of seeing, then only what we do that we think is to benefit beings will have a chance of actually benefiting beings. Why is that so? Because on the path of seeing, the seeing, what is the seeing referring to? It's seeing, not conceptualizing, but directly seeing the illusion of self, and therefore self-grasping no longer has such strong hold over us. So until self-grasping is loosened, that we can cut self-grasping, even when we are hoping and trying so much to benefit others, it will be entangled with self-grasping. Now, identifying these three Bodhisattva disciplines with the 5 paths, it's not to say, I cannot cultivate virtues, I cannot benefit beings before I am on this path, or this path, right? What it's so don't relate to this division in this way. But rather, when we see why this division is set up in this way, we begin to see, what are also the obstacles, right? So until we have achieved path of seeing, where self-grasping is dispelled, then when we talk about benefiting beings, know that a major obstacle is self-grasping. In terms of benefiting beings. Then for the step-by-step again, you know, incrementally you practice. So it's often said, you know, even something like cultivating giving, generosity. Buddha taught, you know, you have to begin first, or not you have to, but if necessary, you begin first with right hand giving to left hand giving to right hand. You start by giving food to others, because food is such a basic need, all the way until you're able to even give your life to others. Then also, step by step, you can also think in terms of the preliminary bodhisattvas, middling bodhisattvas, and the highest kind of level of bodhisattvas. So preliminary bodhisattvas, that like myself, you know, then it says that even if we can mainly preserve and guard our aspiration bodhicitta, if we can guard that, if we can strengthen that, then basically we are practicing, we are protecting our bodhicitta. Then in the middling, you can basically it means so at the beginning you just focus more on, you know, how easily you might give up aspiration bodhicitta, either give up by forgetting, or give up thinking, no, this is not possible to do, you know, I don't really believe this. So first, you know, mainly prevent that from happening, and instead, you know, encourage that to grow stronger and stronger. Then on the middling level, you can rely on what is known as the 4 root downfalls, which is to avoid those 4 root downfalls. So one of the root downfalls is a refusal to give, whether it's giving material things, or giving protection, encouragement, or giving dharma out of stinginess, out of not wanting to be generous. I mean, there's reasons why sometimes we don't give certain things. Not always. It's not always good to just give. But if it's not giving out of stinginess, out of not wanting to share, then that is one of the root downfalls. So these 4 root downfalls, again, in Gampopa's jewel ornament, he gives them in details.
Sorry, Dr. Lang, just now my line is not stable. Can you repeat the last part about the downfalls?
Last part, which is
about the stinginess.
you have to tell me what you heard until, then I know which part.
Until the 4 downfalls.
A little bit before that.
Avoid. Instead of encourage bodhicitta to grow stronger, relying on avoiding the 4 root downfalls.
Okay.
Then
Okay. So the first, so for example, one of the downfalls is a refusal to give out of stinginess, out of not wanting to share. So whether it's giving of material goods, giving of dharma. So I said sometimes we don't give because it's not the right time, it's not the right place, it's not going to be helpful. That's different. Here it's a root downfall when you don't give because it's out of stinginess. So that's one of the root downfalls. So I said the remainder of the other 3, these details of the 4 root downfalls, again, Gampopa jewel ornament. Then the third, the highest, is to then kind of have as a reference point for your Bodhisattva training what is taught as the 18 root downfalls and 46 branch downfalls according to one sutra. The Akasha Garbha Sutra teaches that. Or in the Chinese Bodhisattva vow tradition, the 10 root downfalls with the 48 branch downfalls from the Fan Wang Jin, from this sutra in the Chinese tradition called the Brahmajala. So here what we're seeing is basically, the emphasis is, you begin first with the most general and simple, which is, remember aspiration bodhicitta and don't do anything to damage that. Instead, do the opposite to encourage that. Then you want a more detailed reference point. Then you can begin to learn the 4 root downfalls. Then when you can keep the 4 root downfalls really well, then you can learn about the 18 and the 46, the root and the branch downfalls. So progressively, in that way, you refine, you strengthen your bodhicitta, both aspiration and action bodhicitta vow.
Sorry, Akasha Garbha, that's how many root downfalls?
So the question about Akasha Garbha Sutra, how many root downfalls? Akasha Garbha Sutra gives the 18 root downfalls, and also 46, 18 and 46. Fawanzing is 10 and 48. Brahmajala is 10 and 48. Or as His Holiness the Dalai Lama likes to say, likes to teach and emphasize, like we begin simply by cultivating a good heart. Like be a good person, you know, have a good heart. Because if you don't even like understand, you know, and appreciate a good heart and how to cultivate a good heart, then to talk about, you know, the Bodhisattva path, you know, and all of that, not having self-grasping, all of that is going to be really difficult. So we can say, then we can add, you know, even before like aspiration bodhicitta, first, you know, like a good heart, a kind heart. Recently, you know, I chance upon one of the superstar Buddhist teachers giving a teaching. Maybe he's teaching young people and he thinks young people want to hear this, you know, like he says, who cares about being a good person? Nobody cares about that. I disagree, you know, I think. Young or old, you know, deep down. Of course, he's not saying, you know, like, don't be a good person. I mean, it's just his edgy style, you can say, you know, youthful, you know. But even that, I would say, you know, deep down, we all want to be good, really. When it's time to go to bed, you know, when there's a recognition that, you know, I've been good, you know, I feel good, yeah. You sleep much easier. You eat much easier. You breathe much easier. When there's a deeper sense of knowing the day has been good. I have been a good person. So I think deep down, we all want this feeling like I've been good. So I think we should not, you know, throw out this very basic and important idea, which is be a good person. Be a decent person, you know. Now, of course, we should not go about, judging, oh, this person is good, this person is not good. That's not our business. Yeah? What our business is to ourselves, appreciate, being a good person, being a decent person. Then on that foundation, we can talk about aspiration, bodhicitta. And then on that foundation, we can train ourselves, refine ourselves with avoiding the 4 root downfalls. Then on that basis, we can further refine ourselves with the 18 root downfalls. So that means also, as we move along on the path, we see more and more, more subtle points that needs to be worked out. The Buddha, the ultimate non-judgmental. So there's another example of step-by-step, incrementally encourage us to develop the qualities and purify the negativity. It is said that there was a butcher during the Buddha's time who heard the Buddha's teachings and then, wanted to practice what the Buddha taught, but he came to the Buddha and he says, but my livelihood is a butcher. I've heard your teachings about, not harming, but then my livelihood is a butcher. And the Buddha did not say to him, oh no, you have to stop your work right now. The Buddha did not judge him. The Buddha did not make him feel bad about himself, about his situation. Instead, we hear from there, the Buddha listened very carefully and was very kind and compassionate to him and say, okay, well, what if you took a vow to only do your butchering before noon and not afternoon? Can you do that? So Butcher said, oh, okay, I will try. Buddha said, okay, yeah, why don't you do that? So according to this story, basically incrementally, until finally one day the butcher said, I've decided, to switch to another job. I'm no longer a butcher. Buddha said, very good, So that is a lesson for us especially, to learn, not to judge other people and say, oh, they're such terrible people, such terrible practitioners, but with patience and kindness. So this is not easy because we want to help others, then without having been on the path of seeing, even when we're helping others, we're judging them. We're making them feel bad about themselves or, but Buddha see very clearly how to handle. There's also another story where Buddha went to these fire worshippers. The Kashyapa brothers, 3 Kashyapas, they were fire worshippers. So the Buddha one day said to his disciples, he said, I'm going to go somewhere, you guys don't come with me. He said, I have a mission. So he goes and he hangs out with the fire worshippers. He even helps them. He said, oh, you need me to collect firewood for you? I will, I just need to stay here a few days. And then slowly, he won them over by his genuine friendliness and care and most importantly, lack of self-grasping, and therefore lack of judgment of other people. Not easy, but that is how the Bodhisattva path should be pursued. Now let's see if we have any questions from Saturday or questions from today before we take a short break. Let's see if there are any questions or comments. Meanwhile, if Javier or Omar or someone can provide the link for the sign up for this class. Some of you already have the Zoom information. Maybe you feel you don't need to sign up, but it's good to sign up so that when we have things to send out, materials to send out, we can send the email out and then you will get the information. So in the chat, if somebody can provide the link to the sign up, Javier has just done that. So if you're not sure if you have or not signed up, then just sign up by providing your email address. Then you'll be on this Bodhicharyavatara mailing list. We try to send things out both in English and Spanish, and maybe we'll even include Chinese if we are able to get it all together. It's not too late for other people to join this course. So those of you who, if you think you have friends and other people who are interested, let them know about this. Yeah, especially those who are listening in Chinese. You know, if you have friends, it's not too late to ask, to give them the information and ask them to join. If not, let's take a break and then we will come back and continue and start on chapter 4. Then at the end of the class, I will talk about that preliminary announcement I made on Saturday about taking this class as a credit course, so to say, and what that credit is for. Yeah.
Crédito.
So if you recall from the start of this course, I mentioned that there is one this dedication prayer that we always do at the conclusion of our class. Changju Semjo Rinpoche. So Changju Semjo, this highest Bodhicitta, this precious and most excellent Bodhicitta, Magyepanam Gyegyurchik, second line, where it has not arisen, may it arise. Then the third line is where it has arisen, may it not decline. And the fourth line, and ever increase higher and higher. Right? So these four lines, I said, it has been pointed out by these commentaries that they correspond to Shantideva's text. So the excellent and precious bodhicitta is explained in chapter 1 of this text, which is the title of chapter 1 is The Excellence and Benefits of Bodhicitta. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. That is chapter 2 and 3. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, may it not be weakened. Now we are beginning that section, which is chapter 4 and chapter 5 and chapter 6. And ever increase higher and higher is chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. And then chapter 10, the last chapter, is the dedication of the merit for the benefit of all beings, which takes us a full circle back to bodhicitta itself. So generating bodhicitta and dedicating merit in the great way, they are closely related. In fact, Kyopa Jigten Sumgen points out they are basically the same thing, but in different context. So now let's look at chapter 4, this chapter called Carefulness. Let's read together from verse 1 to 12. The children of the conqueror who thus have firmly grasped this bodhicitta should never turn aside from it, strive never to transgress its disciplines. Whatever was begun without due heed, and all that was not previously conceived, although a promise and a pledge were given, it is right to reconsider. Shall I act or not? Yet, what the Buddhas and their heirs have scrutinized in their great wisdom, I myself have probed and scrutinized. Why should I now procrastinate? For if I bind myself with promises, but fail to carry out my words in deed, then every being will have been betrayed. What destiny must lie in store for me? If in the teachings it is said that those who in their thoughts intend to give a small and paltry thing, but then draw back, will take rebirth as hungry spirits, how can I expect a happy destiny if from my heart I summon wandering beings to the highest bliss, but then deceive and fail them? As for those who, losing bodhicitta, lead others nonetheless to liberation, karmic law is inconceivable and only understood by the omniscient. This failure for the bodhisattvas is the gravest of all downfalls, for should it ever come to pass, the good of every being is thrown down. And anyone who for a single instant halts the merit of a bodhisattva wanders endlessly in evil states, because the welfare of all beings is reduced. Destroy a single being's joy and you will work the ruin of yourself. No need to speak of bringing low the joy of beings infinite as space itself. And those who circle in samsara, mixing powerful downfalls with the power of bodhicitta back and forth, will long be hindered from the bodhisattva grounds. And so, according to my promise, I will act attentively. From this day forth, if I now fail to strive, I'll fall from the low to even lower states. So remember, right? The title of this chapter is carefulness. So it almost has a sense of danger, danger, danger. So in Spanish, right? Danger, you say cuidado, be careful, right? Watch out, danger, danger, danger. So we're entering into chapter 4 after you could say we have celebrated the high of having generated bodhicitta. Everything is so wonderful. Hallelujah. Praise Lord Buddha. The 3 jewels and everything. And you are throwing flowers into the air. There is a big party going on. All the gods and spirits are happy. They are overjoyed. You are overjoyed. Okay, now honeymoon is over. There are bills to pay for the party. There are promises to fulfill. So in a way, yes, now it's like, you can say Shantideva's tone is changing now. It's almost like, okay, now let's get to work. So for this work, so the overall tone is, be careful. What do we need to be careful about? Ultimately, what he wants us to be careful about, to be afraid of, you could say, the dangers that he is now helping us to protect ourselves against is the dangers of the afflictive emotions. Children of the conquerors or sons of the Buddhas. This is referring to bodhisattvas. It's not about male or female. But of course, in ancient India, is Buddha Putra, the Sanskrit, here the connotation, why it's sons, is how in the ancient system, it's sons that succeed their fathers in terms of princes becoming kings. So here, children of the conqueror, children of the Buddhas, is referring to bodhisattvas. So now we have to understand that we are the heirs. We are the successors to the Buddhas, meaning we will one day become Buddhas ourselves. So he says, now that we have grasped bodhicitta, now that we have held bodhicitta in our hands, we should not turn away from it, and instead we should be careful not to break our promise. So then from verse 2 to 12, he is stating it in like very kind of like heavy terms, to say, if you turn away from this promise, then it's really very negative. So be careful. So verse 2 and 3 go together. Verse 2 is basically saying, as for things that you decided to do without thinking much about it and without really thinking through it, they're just in the spur of the moment, you decide, I'm going to do something. Then yes, it's reasonable later on when you're actually going to go do it to kind of reconsider and say, is it something that I should do? But here he says, but in contrast, this business about bodhicitta, this resolve to become Buddhas for the benefit of all beings, 2 points, he says. One, this has been carefully and wisely considered by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the past. So they have certainly seen everything and considered all the pros and cons, and they have recommended this as the most excellent thing for us to practice and to actualize. And then he says, and you yourself have also considered this carefully already. So now that you have generated bodhicitta, don't procrastinate. Don't give excuses anymore. So this is the side that I think he needs to also be kind of like firm with his words, and even you can say threatening. Warning. So we cannot just keep saying, be kind, be compassionate. Then misguided kindness, compassion, and sweetness, is kindness, wisdom, kindness, compassion, sweetness, to allow afflictive emotions to grow. That cannot do. So that will be misdirected. So we need to be firm and resolute. So here, beginning of chapter 4, he tells us this. He says, now, don't waste time anymore. Don't procrastinate. You have made this promise. Now start fulfilling it. 4, 5, 6 verses, they go together. So basically the gist of 4, 5, 6 is Shantideva says, if you make promises, right, and then you fail to carry them out, so that your words and your actions actually coincide, then, if it is a small thing, even a small thing, Buddha says, if you decide to give something and then later you decide not to give, even that, can result in rebirth as a hungry ghost. How much more, you have made this promise of benefiting all beings universally as a Buddha, and then you fail to follow up with that promise. So he says, don't do that. Verse 7 is Shantideva kind of responding to what he could tell, perhaps someone raising an objection, which is there are stories among in the Buddha's life and the stories that Buddha has told, whereby there are some who in one context they say that they gave up the bodhicitta vow, but then later it is said that they also achieve liberation. They achieve some kind of, maybe not complete liberation as Buddha, but they achieve like the liberation of Shravakas. So basically this verse 7 is Shantideva's anticipating someone objecting and said, well, maybe giving up bodhicitta is not such a bad thing because, there are stories of how someone gave up bodhicitta, but in the end, they also achieve, like at the very least, they achieve kind of liberation through the Shravaka path. So maybe it's not that bad. But here in verse 7, what Shantideva is saying is, he says, yes, there are stories like that. But overall, he says, it is not the case that giving up bodhicitta will have a good result. Don't mistake, don't kind of misconceive how cause and effect works, and specifically the cause and effect related to bodhicitta, how it works. Cause and effect always works with the same principles, no matter what the context, first of all. But in the context of bodhicitta, the cause and effect is that if you give up bodhicitta, then there is bound to be kind of negative results. Giving up by neglect, you create obstacles for yourself. You create problems for yourself. But as for those cases where it seems like someone gave up bodhicitta and they continue to do okay, here Shantideva basically says, these are things that we might not see directly how it works, and these are only things that only fully awakened Buddhas fully awakened can understand. But don't give rise to the wrong view that giving up bodhicitta, damaging your bodhicitta vow, can lead to good results. In other words, don't misquote and misinterpret stories and come to like conclusions that are fundamentally at odds with what the Buddha taught as the basic principles. As in the Christian tradition, they say, no one, can quote or misquote, you could say. But basically, no one knows, in the Christian tradition, they say, no one knows, the words of God as well as the devil. Because the devil has been there right from the beginning, So everything that God has said, the devil knows exactly. So just because, someone can quote stories, this, that, if it can easily sort of misinterpret it, deliberately or not. So we got to be careful. So here, Shantideva is saying, okay, I know you guys Because remember the original, right? He composed this for his fellow monks at Nalanda, this great seat of learning, right? The greatest university during in the ancient world. So he knows, you know. So he's basically saying, "Hey, you guys, okay? At this point, don't go say, well, you know, there's this story of this person who gave up bodhicitta. They turn out okay. There's that story over there, and they turn out okay." He says, no, no. So instead, he says in verse 8, this failure, meaning turning back, turning our backs towards the vow that we have made, or neglecting that vow, this is the gravest of all downfalls. Verse 8, it says, this is the worst of all downfalls for a bodhisattva. For should it ever come to pass, if you ever lose your bodhicitta, the bodhisattva resolve, so at the very, meaning if you give up aspiration bodhicitta, then the good of every being is being threatened. Why? Because the bodhisattva vow is the vow to achieve the good and the welfare of all beings. And if you turn away from that, then that means, you know, you have abandoned the goodness and the well-being of all beings. And this, he says, would be the greatest failure for a bodhisattva. So be careful. So again, verse 2 and 3 is warning us to be careful against procrastinating and not carrying out our vow. Verse 4, 5, and 6 is warning us against turning back on our word and not fulfilling our promise. Verse 7 and 8 is warning us against losing bodhicitta. Verse 9 and 10 is warning us to be careful not to become an obstacle for other bodhisattvas. So 9 and 10, right? It says, if anyone for even a single instant halts the merit of a bodhisattva. So what does it mean to halt the merit of a bodhisattva? Not literally, but what it means is like, you know, you prevent them. If you prevent a bodhisattva from carrying out their bodhisattva resolve, then it says, you know, the result of doing that is you will wander endlessly in the evil states. Why? Not because, you know, like the Buddhas will punish you, but essentially, he's saying, what you're doing when you obstruct someone's progress on the bodhisattva path is you are damaging the welfare of all beings. Be careful about that, he says. So 10 says, you know, destroy one person's joy and that will bring ruin to yourself. Now imagine, by obstructing a bodhisattva's resolve and vow and practice to achieve the welfare of all beings, if you obstruct that, then can you imagine what kind of ruin you can bring to yourself? So 9 and 10 is saying, be careful with regards to not knowingly, especially, but even unknowingly cause another person's bodhisattva practice to decline. Now, I want to say, you know, like in the real world application of this, it's not easy. I know that, you know, because in the real world application of this, sometimes you see someone doing something and you think, you know, that this is probably not good for them. And then more specifically, let's leave aside random people and outside of the context of bodhisattva practice, but let's limit it to, you see a fellow practitioner on the same path, and they have decided on the surface to do something, right, that looks good, but you know that, or you think you know, right? That's how we are, you know. We think we know that there are some problems there. And then what do? Not easy to decide what to do. So what Shantideva here is saying is, be careful. Don't out of your own afflictive emotions cause another person to kind of not engage in Bodhisattva activities. So this reminds me of an incident in Kyopa Jigten Sumgun's life, where one day he decided that he's going to take all the tea that he had left and offer it to the new community. He had just arrived at his root teacher's community, and one day he decided, you know, he was going to take whatever tea he had left. Tea in their context, you know, is like a staple, right? It's not just like for fun. It's like part of, you know, staying alive. So he wanted to give that away. But then one of the more senior people in that community pulled him aside and said, you don't do that. Keep it for yourself. You don't have much, you know, don't do that. So there, you know, without knowing exactly the intention of this person, why this person said that, the biography doesn't tell us that. Yeah. But there it is said that Kyoba Rinpoche said, later he understood something, which is, he said, whenever a fellow practitioner wants to engage in an action of selfless generosity, he says, we should not obstruct that. So, not easy, you know, this point. So, bottom line is, don't be so quick to shoot off your mouth. So we say, you know, especially when someone wants to do something good, don't be so quick to shoot off your mouth and tell them, oh, actually that's too much, don't give that much, actually, no, this person don't need your help, blah, 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 blah. Practice restraint. And if you're really genuinely out of care of this person, you have to think of skillful and good way to give advice. Also, I think in the real world application, it's not, at least for me, as simple as saying, do the opposite, which is every time someone wants to do, a fellow practitioner, someone who's generated bodhicitta, wants to do something selfless, seemingly really good, then in every case you're like, oh yeah, good, oh yeah, good. At least for me, it's also not as simple as that. I'm not recommending that either, because again, in the real world, there's a lot of people taking advantage of other people, especially in the spiritual realm, in the religious business. We cannot say, oh, they mean well, and so it's not so easy. I'm not saying that Shantideva, my understanding of Shantideva is he's also not giving simple answers, but he is calling us to be cautious. So in other words, don't let, emotions immediately take over. And then for those emotions, right, to take over and then convince us that whatever we're doing is based on clear seeing. Because oftentimes it is not. Oftentimes it is our personal agenda hiding in the background. Again, ego grasping. So that's why, it says, primarily, your actions of helping others cannot really bring about the result of helping others unless you're on the path of seeing. Meaning, so lesson from there is, the more we reduce self-grasping, then the more we can genuinely and effectively actually benefit others. So now verse 11, another warning, another thing to guard against, to be careful about. Here Shantideva says, and then if you continuously give into, these powerful mistakes, powerful downfalls, and then again powerfully generate bodhicitta back and forth, meaning you take strong poison, you take strong medicine, back and forth, back and forth. He says, this is not going to work either. You need to be determined, Now I have powerful bodhicitta, I need to cleanse, remove the powerful afflictive emotions. I need to avoid all the downfalls, all the things that will cause me to fall from my resolve. I need to with determination, with clear understanding, work on cutting them. Otherwise, samsara will never end. So, verse 11. Verse 12, so he says, kind of to summarize this whole section, he says, so now, in short, and so, according to the promise, according to the bodhicitta vow I have given rise to, I will act with careful attention, knowing that if I don't do this, only negative results will come. So today we will end here with the text, but something that I forgot to point out, which I will now talk about briefly, quickly. This chapter, right, chapter 4 and 5, taken together, they are basically two, you can say, two mental qualities that you should cultivate so that your practice, especially your practice of the paramita of ethical conduct, of disciplined conduct, can be successful. Your practicing of shila, of disciplined conduct, in observing disciplined conduct, perfecting disciplined conduct, achieving the paramita of shila, these two mental qualities are very important. Carefulness, attentiveness, and the next chapter, here translated as vigilant introspection. Chapter 2 and 3, right, corresponds to the paramita of giving, of generosity. In chapter 2, we give up one kind of giving. What do we give up there? We give up our unskillful actions. So we give those, so to say, give away. But also then, in the context of preparing to give rise to bodhicitta, we also, Shantideva also talks about giving offerings. So that's another kind of giving. Then, of course, the ultimate giving, really, is the giving rise to bodhicitta. So chapter 2 and 3 is the paramita of dana, of giving, of generosity. Six, seven, eight, nine are the next 4 paramitas. And each of them, the titles of 6, 7, 8, 9 correspond with the last 4 paramitas, which is patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom. 6, 7, 8, 9. So now let's do a brief dedication before I talk about kind of business stuff, logistics and things like that. Let's dedicate first before we lose the merit. Changju semjo rinpoche mage banam ge gyuche Geba nyampa me pa ya Gone gong du pe war sho